friends, Amy here from the Stamp Market. In today's video, I'm going to give you a close-up look at our Dye-Oxide inks, a few of the fun features about them. Now let's jump right in and get started. I have switched to my overhead camera and I'm going to walk through the inks, a few of their features, and why you might want to add these to your Stamp Market collection. Okay, for a quick comparison in size, this is our standard size ink pad. These are our new Dye-Oxide. They're 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. When you open them up, the actual inking surface is 2 inches by 2 inches. And then you have your spot. So it's really a nice in-between size. It's really easy to hold and to use, and it's still the perfect size for most stamp images and your bigger blending brushes. I really wanted to make sure you got a good rainbow offering in our initial lineup. So we have a really nice spectrum of color for you, definitely some darks and lights and some brights and a few muted tones, so you can really create some unique color combinations and blending backgrounds. Now ours are called Dye-Oxide. It's just a fun name, something we didn't want to just call them oxide, and they aren't just dye inks. They're actually a mix of a pigment and dye ink, and they act more like a paint than a water-based ink. And they react with water, and they also are reactive on cardstock. And depending on the cardstock that you use, they will react differently. These are definitely a product that when you get them, experimenting is part of the process. Everyone's supplies at home, their cardstock, and the things they use are a little bit different. And ink will react differently depending on your environment. I do want to remind everyone that inks function differently depending on your environment too. If you live in a very moist climate and you have a lot of moisture in the air and your cardstocks are always a little more moist, you will have a different reaction with your inks. I live in the desert of Utah. When I swatch them, these inks dry quickly on cardstock. No matter what I'm doing, they have a really quick dry time for me because of the heat and dryness of the desert. So when I spritz and do different things, I get a certain reaction. Now, everyone's going to get a similar effect using the oxide inks, but just remember that your climate does play into that, especially if your papers have a little bit of moisture. So keep that in mind as you're creating, that everyone is going to have a little bit different experience. Now, if you're an experienced stamper, you already know that and have a little bit of that with regular stamping and regular dye inks. Before we get started, I just want to mention that I am going to do a 2-part video. The first part, I'm just going over the basics of the up-close features of this ink. In the second video, I'm going to do a few more tricks and techniques and show you a few samples that you can create using these dye inks as well. Now, to get started, I want to talk about the cardstock that you use when you use inks. One of my very favorite papers is this Mixed Media by Strathmore. It is a very heavy stock. I would say like 120-pound cover stock, and it has a nice Bristol smooth finish, and it really keeps a true to color. When you swatch and do things, I feel like you get the actual true color that is intended. Another one that's maybe not as expensive and accessible through Blick Art Studios is this Smooth Bristol paper. I really do love this one as well. It's a little thinner weight, it's a lot more smooth, so you're going to get a much smoother image. I feel like this one gives you a really close resemblance to this Mixed Media, but I did notice that a few of my colors shifted a little bit with this paper. Another favorite of mine that I use with all dye inks, but I've found that I love with the oxide as well, is just the Mixed Media paper. This is a much thinner weight paper. I would say closer to an 80-pound, and it has a nice smooth surface with a little bit of a tooth. I love it for watercoloring, but I do notice that this wrinkles a little bit more if you're adding a lot of water. So if you plan on using more water, I would go with this nice Mixed Media. Now, we also sell an ultra smooth white cardstock, and I do find that this is very beautiful, and the colors, I would say, are really close to the actual Pantone that is intended. And the reason I bring that up is it's important to know that when using any ink at all, the color of the paper that you use, the brightness of the paper that you're using, and the quality really affects not only the color, but the way things stamp and blend. So be sure that you're using premium papers when you want premium results. We don't cut tomatoes with dull knives. Just remember that having the right tools in your craft space is really important to enjoying what you're doing. You will have better results, and you will love the outcome of your projects more. Now let's show you these in action. So this is the Mixed Media paper, and this is the Stamp Market Ultra Smooth cardstock. And I'm just going to show you a little bit. You won't be able to tell as much until they're dry, But once these dry, I mean, it looks fluorescent until they dry a little bit. But you'll see as those dry out that the color shifts a little bit. Now I want to remind you that when you ink and stamp with these, that the dry time is important to getting the accurate color. So also remember that you're going to start to notice that this one starts to get a muted tone and this one stays a little bit brighter. And that is the difference in paper that is used. They're a little bit of a muted tone of the original color. That's the nature of a dioxide ink. They also act more like a paint, so the coverage is definitely different. You get a more solid, even coverage on that cardstock. So as those have dried, you can tell there's a shade difference. This is a shade darker than the Stamp Market cardstock. We tested with the Stamp Market cardstock, so you should get a really close to perfect color match with our cardstock. But remember, depending on the cardstock you're using, you are going to get a little bit of a color shift. So find the cardstock that works best for you, but just remember there will be a little bit of variation. Now let's go ahead and spritz these and show you how fun they are with a little reactive. I love that you can re-wet them and you get a totally different look to the ink. As those dry, you can start to see that shift. Now if you spray enough water and you can let it kind of run and drip and create a little bit different look that way as well. Now I think it's also important to mention that when you buy these ink pads, they do come with a nice amount of ink in them, but remember that the manufacturer can't put too much ink in these because they will leak. So I always recommend getting a re-inker, especially with this type of ink. Usually the techniques that you're doing with this type of ink require more coverage, especially if you're doing a lot of ink blending. So it is a thicker ink and it does require a little bit more to create that coverage that you're looking for. And another really great reason that you want to buy re-inkers is you can really add so many unique looks to your cards with re-inkers, especially the dioxide formulation. I will show that in the next video. Okay, I filled up a little dish of water and I'm just going to go ahead and watercolor a swatch so you can see how thick that watercolors. It's like using an acrylic paint. And it's really fun to work with. Now this is the Stamp Market cardstock, and here is the mixed media paper. On both of these types of samples, you'll see that this absorbs the ink so much faster, and that's because it's just more porous and it's not intended necessarily for watercoloring and that extra moisture. But this paper really holds that watercolor, and it keeps the color on top of the paper more than it does absorb into the paper. So just really experiment with your paper. I can't emphasize that enough, and that's something I just really wanted to talk about in this video because I really feel like it can change and affect the outcome of your projects. Another great thing is you can buy a little ink tray like this. They're available online a lot of places. I don't know where this is from. It was a gift, but you can drop in a little bit of ink in all of these. They don't really dry out, and a lot of them come with a cover, and you can simply keep the cover. And this is also for a watercolor palette. You can simply just keep that together and you can have a little drop of color whenever you want to add to your projects. And it's just a really great thing to have on hand. Okay, next up I want to show you how to take your, this is just, everyone's seen this before. This technique's been around since the beginning of time. You take your block. I'm going to lay down a little bit of paper towel so I don't get it all over. Spray your block. And then you'll want to, you can just smash that down onto your cardstock for some different looks. Again, that is the mixed media paper. Now let's try that on the smooth cardstock. I got a little bit much right there, but it just goes to show you, that's the great thing about working with this type of ink. The idea is to create a messier look. And at the Stamp Market, we will always probably do a brighter, lighter, messier look. But that's the fun about having the Stamp Market colors. Look how fun that is. Now remember, this is the perfect technique to make some really unique backgrounds. And the great thing is you can add any design to the front of this. Adding a little pop of color to your white cardstock is the easiest way to elevate your card designs and try a different look. And you don't have to be so worried about the perfection of it. The whole idea is that messy, unique look. One thing I would do if you get the bundle of colors is definitely take the time to swatch out those colors, and really I would do one with and without the water. That way you can really see the different looks that you can get, and it's fun just to have these on hand so that you can put together color combinations. And I did both of these in the Bristol media paper from Strathmore. And then I have another swatch where I swatched them on the Stamp Market cardstock so I could see the color that I was getting. Okay, one of the amazing features of these Dye-Oxide inks, because they are a pigment base, is they stamp beautifully on dark cardstock. Look at that, just like paint. Now, once it dries, it starts to oxidize and it kind of shifts colors, has some darks and lights. It's really fun. They create some really fun backgrounds. I definitely challenge you to try this with some of your backgrounds on your cards. I love craft cardstock and I love all the unique looks. Look at how some of those dry and shift with a light and dark. That's normal, and that is the nature of this type of ink. So it's really fun to swatch out all the colors. You can see how some of them go really dark on the craft and some of them go a little bit lighter and have that marbling. And remember, you can spray and have fun reactive effects as well. Now, another great feature is vellum. When you use regular ink on vellum, just dye-based ink, it beads up and you can't use it as much. So what I love is that this works on vellum. Love it. It always looks so good. Now, it does take a lot longer to dry, or you can emboss it if you're worried about waiting for that. So another great use for those as well. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to show you guys, obviously, one of the favorite things to do with Oxide inks is ink blend. Now we're just going to do the simple monochromatic look from blush to salmon to papaya. I just want to show you how beautifully those blend out. Don't be afraid to really ink up. I suggest that you don't go like this on a foam pad. I suggest that you tap. And then look at that coverage. It's just really creamy and blends out really well. Now remember, you want to come from the sides so that you pull some of that ink off. You can also do this on a craft mat so that you have a little bit of that ink to pull from. Now you could use a different ink blending brush for each of the colors, just so that you don't get that muddiness. Now, remember that you can just start blending, and the more you blend, keep working it and trust that process. And look how nicely that will start to shift and blend. Sometimes I come back in with the lighter brush. Just keep blending. It seriously blends like butter. Now for the last color, let's do the darker papaya. In the next video, we'll get into some fun techniques that you can do on top of these types of backgrounds. But today I just wanted to make sure that you have the basics of the benefits of these inks and the differences between our regular dye and this pigment ink. Now I'm going to come back in with that salmon, and I'm just going to give that a little bit better blend, even up into the blush. And there you have a gorgeous background ready for a floral, for a fun greeting. You can die cut your florals off of this and get that variation. There's so many different ways you can use these panels. So if you wanted just to sit and color blend some different color patterns, you could easily set those aside, and when you have time to die cut or want to create, you could use those as die cut panels. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you learned a little something about why you need these in your craft room. Be sure to join me for part 2 next week, where I dive deeper into some tips and techniques that are a little more advanced and something I think you'll enjoy. I will be sharing a few samples on how to make those in the upcoming video. I also have a very fun class coming up using these Dye-Oxide inks and some unique product that I think you're going to love. It will challenge you and inspire you to create a little differently, and I hope that you'll join us as well. Be sure you're subscribed to this channel and our social media accounts so that you get a notification of when that class will be available. Thank you again for joining me. See you next week.